graveyard shift at Benny's Diner was lonely, but that night, the silence was suffocating. It was the night we turned the clocks back. At 1:59 a.m., I glanced at my phone, waiting for it to jump back to 1 a.m. The moment always felt strange, but that night, strange didn't even begin to cover it. The second the minute hand fell back, the front door creaked open. No bell, no rush of cold air, just the slow groan of hinges straining. A man stepped inside, tall, draped in an old suit that looked like it had been pulled from a grave. He walked without sound, his shoes making no noise on the tile. I swallowed hard. "Can I help you?" My voice quivered, echoing off the walls. He didn't answer, just moved to the booth by the window, eyes fixed on me. They were dark, too dark, like staring into a void. He finally spoke. "Midnight has its ghosts, but this hour belongs to the lost." The lights flickered, a cold breeze slicing through the room. I stepped back, the chill biting into my skin. "Excuse me," I managed, but he didn't repeat himself. Instead, he reached for the cup of coffee I hadn't given him and took a sip. My heart raced as I glanced at the clock. 1:23 a.m. The man looked out the window, his face reflecting in the glass. But there was something else in the reflection. A shadow, taller, twisted, looming behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. I backed away, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The man's voice cut through the silence. "When the hour ends, you'll see them. They only come when time resets." Before I could react, the room dimmed. The clock now read 1:59 a.m., and I felt a pull, like the air itself was holding its breath. Whispers filled the room, voices I couldn't understand, getting louder and closer. I fumbled for my phone, the screen casting a weak light, and saw them, shapes crawling along the walls, eyes glistening like wet stones. The man was gone, his booth empty, but his voice whispered in my ear. "It's too late now," I screamed as the cold fingers gripped my arms, pulling me down. The clock jumped back to 1 a.m. as I woke up on the floor, the fluorescent lights blinding. The diner was silent again, but the bruises on my arms told me it was real. I moved to Hollow Creek to escape the relentless noise of the city, drawn by the quiet, mist-veiled woods that encircled my new home. The locals warned me about the path that wound through the forest, a path said to shift and twist, especially when night fell. I dismissed it as nothing more than a local ghost story meant to thrill newcomers. One evening, curiosity got the best of me, and with a flashlight clutched tightly in hand, I ventured down the trail. The chill of the air clung to my skin, and the silence was suffocating, as if the forest held its breath. The path stretched endlessly, far longer than it had seemed during the day. An unsettling feeling of being watched settled over me like a shroud. I told myself it was just nerves, but then, faint and chilling, came the sound. A giggle, delicate and sharp, breaking the oppressive silence. I spun around, heart thundering in my chest. The path behind me was different now. The familiar landmarks gone, replaced by shadows that seemed to shift and breathe. My breath caught as the girl's figure dissolved back into the fog. I stumbled backward, panic tightening my throat. I turned and bolted, my feet pounding the uneven ground as the path twisted wildly beneath me. The forest around me seemed to close in, whispering secrets and voices too low to understand. I leaned against the door, gasping, relief washing over me. But My relief turned to dread when I noticed the muddy footprints smeared across the wooden floor. They trailed into the living room, ending at the window. Beyond the window stood the girl, her face stretched into an unnatural grin. "Why did you leave?" she whispered, though her mouth remained still. The words echoed inside my mind, cold and piercing. The voice came again, colder and more menacing. "You're on the path now. It's yours forever." The days passed in an agonizing blur. The oppressive feeling of being watched never left. Every glance at the window revealed fleeting, shadowy figures, lurking just beyond the tree line. Always waiting, always watching. The path was no longer outside. It had found its way into my home, growing, twisting, living. And each night, the giggle echoed louder, closer. Thunder growled in the distance, an ominous prelude to the rain that battered the house. It was one of those nights when sleep was impossible. The storm too fierce, too restless. The rain lashed against the windows like cold, grasping fingers, relentless and insistent. I sat alone in the living room, the muted hum of the lamp, casting long, swaying shadows that seemed alive in the flickering light. The house creaked as if sharing a secret with the wind. It was on a night like this that strange things happened, things that should be impossible. The clock ticked steadily toward midnight, its steady rhythm a stark contrast to the chaos outside. I was just starting to lose myself in the worn, comforting pages of an old book when a sudden, sharp knock echoed through the room. It was a sound out of place, jarring and demanding. The book slipped from my grasp, landing with a soft thud on the floor. I froze, my pulse quickening. Midnight visitors in a storm? No, that wasn't right. My hand tightened on the arm of the chair as I listened, breath held tight. Again, the knock. This time louder, more urgent, as if whoever was on the other side needed me to answer now. I stood up slowly, the floorboards creaking underfoot, every step magnifying the silence that had fallen inside. My mind raced with questions. Who could it be in weather like this? And why at this hour? A line of wet footprints. My heart hammered as I followed the trail with my eyes, but they dissolved into the darkness, leaving nothing but questions. I swallowed hard, my throat dried despite the damp air. Retreating inside, I locked the door, the solid click of the deadbolt feeling like a thin barrier against whatever had left those prints. I turned toward the window, heart stuttering in my chest. A figure stood there, half obscured by the rain streaking down the pane. It was drenched, dark hair plastered to its face, wearing old, torn clothes that clung to its frame. Its eyes were wide, vacant, and staring out into the storm. Lightning flashed, illuminating the figure for a split second, before plunging the room into darkness. When the light returned, the window was empty. Only my reflection, pale and shaken, stared back at me. I took a step back, my legs weak as fear coiled around my throat. The realization came with a chill so intense, I shivered. The whisper, faint but clear, rose above the rain, tickling the back of my neck, as if someone stood right behind me. You shouldn't have opened the door. The rain didn't stop until dawn, each drop a reminder of that voice, that figure. That night, I sat awake, eyes darting to every shadow, waiting for a whisper that never came. But from that night on, I never answered the door at midnight, not even when the knocks came again, steady and patient. The storm seemed to linger, always waiting, and each knock held a promise that one day the visitor would return.